Hello and welcome to our School at Home class in English Grade 7. We are in the third quarter of our set of lessons and I hope everybody will delight in learning today with lesson number 14, using clauses and sentences. Before we proceed with the lesson, you may take the pretest in just a few minutes. Direction: identify the underlined clauses if it is an independent or dependent clause. Write IC for independent and DC for dependent. Number 1. Our dog will run away if the gate is left open. Number 2. The movie was good, although it was too long. Number 3. The teacher who lives next door to me is Mrs. Santos. Number 4. This is the homework assignment that you missed last week. And number 5. Because of the bad weather, the school will be cancelled tomorrow. Here are the answers to the pretest. Were you able to get the correct answers? That's great! Later in this video lesson, it will be explained how to identify independent clause or dependent clause in the sentence. Let's have a quick recap of your previous lesson. A sentence consists of two parts, the subject and the predicate. The subject is what or whom the sentence is about, and the predicate is the part which says something about the subject. Examples: my friend lives in Japan. My friend is the subject and lives in Japan is the complete predicate. Both girls are experienced swimmers. Both girls is the subject and are experienced swimmers is the predicate. The basic parts of a sentence are the subject and the verb. The subject is usually a noun, and the verb or the predicate usually follows the subject and identifies an action or state of being. In these examples, lives in the first sentence is the simple predicate, and in the second sentence, are experienced is the simple predicate. Have you ever experienced having trouble in differentiating phrases, clauses, and sentences, especially when you are reading or writing? In this lesson, we will tackle the difference of each structure. Phrases, clauses, and sentences are very similar, but they do have different rules. What is a phrase? A phrase has no subject nor verb. Phrases can be very short or quite long. Two examples are after dinner and waiting for the rain to stop. Phrases can't be used alone, but you can use them as parts of a sentence where they are used as parts of speech. What is a clause? Clauses are a group of words that have both subjects and predicates. Examples: I took the dog to the park. This example has one subject, which is the word I, and one predicate, which is the word took. Since they are working together to form a comprehensible sentence, this sentence has one clause. Next example: I love learning, so I spend a lot of time reading. This example has two predicates, love and spend. Since they are working together with separate subjects, this sentence has two clauses. Unlike phrases, a clause can sometimes act as a sentence. This type of clause is called an independent clause. Independent clause contains a complete thought and can stand alone. Example: the dog barked at him. This isn't always the case, and some clauses cannot be used on their own. These are called the subordinate or dependent clause. Dependent clause has no complete meaning unless it is combined with an independent clause. Example: when the man broke into the house. While the independent clause could be used by itself as a complete sentence, the subordinate clause could not. For it to be correct, it would need to be paired with another clause. Let us combine the two examples to make it a complete sentence. When the man broke into the house, the dog barked at him. That sounds much better, right? What is a sentence? A complete sentence has a subject and predicate. Example: you ate fish. So what is the difference between sentences and clauses? Sentences are made up of clauses. Clauses are not made up of sentences. It is a unit of a sentence. Let us go back to our previous example. When the man broke into the house is an example of a dependent clause. The dog barked at him is an example of an independent clause. When these two are combined together, it forms a complete sentence. In other words, a sentence is at a higher level than a clause. Take note of this illustration to better understand the hierarchy of each structure. When letters are combined, they can form words. When words are combined or grouped together, they can form phrases. When phrases are grouped together, they can form clauses. When clauses are combined together, they can form complete sentences. Let's practice. Identify the structure of the highlighted and underlined words. Write P for phrase, C for clause, and S for sentence. Number 1. Sandra went to a party. Number 2. In the morning, it's best to get up early. Number 3. She arrived to work on time in spite of leaving home so late. Number 4. Faced with so many problems, I decided to get professional help. And number 5. When Susan saw the situation of many people getting sick, she decided to become a doctor. Here are the answers for the guided practice. Were you able to get the correct answers? That's splendid! In number 1, Sandra is the subject, went is a simple predicate. Therefore, if there is a subject and predicate, this is an example of a sentence. In number 2, it's best to get up early is an example of an independent clause. It can stand alone and has a complete thought or idea, even if you remove the phrase in the morning. In number 3, she arrived to work on time is also an example of an independent clause because it can stand alone even if the dependent clause, in spite of leaving home so late, will not be paired to it. In number 4, faced with so many problems has no subject nor verb. This phrase is used as a modifier of the subject. And in number 5, when Susan saw the situation of many people getting sick is an example of a dependent clause. It cannot stand alone as it needs to be paired with another independent clause to give more meaning in the sentence. There are also basic sentence structures in English. First is a simple sentence which contains one independent clause. Example, Judy laughed. Another one is the compound sentence, which contains one independent clause plus one or more independent clauses. Example, Judy laughed and Jimmy cried. Lastly, we have the complex sentence, which contains one independent clause plus one or more dependent clauses. Example, Jimmy cried when Judy laughed. Please take note that independent clauses are joined by any of these 7 coordinating conjunctions: and, but, for, or, nor, so, and yet. Example, he went to the theme park and he went on all the rides. These are 2 independent clauses joined by the word and. Dependent clauses use subordinating conjunctions. Some common subordinating conjunctions are after, as, before, once, since, until, even though, although, when, and while, etc. Example, although I am not sure, I will go ahead and try. Let's practice. Identify the sentence structure of the given examples. Write simple, compound, or complex sentence. Ready? Number 1. Our teacher gave us a homework today. Number 2. I would go, but I have to ask permission from my teacher. And number 3. Before we begin the discussion, we reviewed the lesson. Here are the answers. Were you able to get the correct answers? That's marvelous. In number 1, our teacher gave us a homework today is an example of an independent clause. If it has one independent clause, therefore, it is a simple sentence. In number 2, there are two independent clauses joined by the conjunction but. I would go, but I have to ask permission from my teacher. Therefore, this is a compound sentence. In number 3, we have one dependent clause, which is before we begin the discussion, and one independent clause, which is we reviewed the lesson. Therefore, this sentence is a complex sentence. Nobody can do everything, but everyone can do something. It's the thought for today. It shows a kind of act where we can help one another doing our part or our responsibilities in the community. As others do their part, let's be sure to do ours. How about you? What does this quotation mean to you? What type of clauses are used in the sentence? These are two independent clauses as they are connected with the coordinating conjunction but, and these clauses can stand alone. To wrap everything up that we have talked about in this lesson, let us always remember that a phrase has no subject nor verb. Clauses are a group of words that have both subjects and predicates. A complete sentence has a subject and predicate. The difference of sentences and clauses are: sentences are made up of clauses, clauses are not made up of sentences. It is a unit of a sentence. Now that you have learned about phrases, clauses, and sentences, it is time for your post-test. Answer the following questions. Choose the correct letter of your answer. Number 1. Complete this sentence. An independent clause has a subject and a verb, and it A. Expresses a complete thought. B. Can stand alone as a coherent sentence. C. Both A and B. Or D. None of the above. Number 2. Complete this sentence. Because a subordinate clause depends on the rest of the sentence to express a complete thought, it is called a letter A. Noun clause. B. Prepositional clause. C. Dependent clause. Or D. Independent clause. Number 3. Choose the true statement. Letter A. A subordinate clause makes sense and has a complete thought. B. A subordinate clause must be paired to an independent clause. C. A subordinate clause standing alone is called a simple sentence. Or D. A subordinate clause always stands alone as an independent sentence. Number 4. Identify the independent clause in this sentence. We went to the movies and we agreed that it is enjoyable. Letter A. It is enjoyable. B. We went to the movies. C. We agreed that it is enjoyable. Or D. Both B and C. Number 5. Which sentence is an example of a compound sentence? Letter A. She weeded the garden and swept out the garage. Letter B. She weeded the garden and she swept out the garage. Letter C. She weeded the garden after she swept out the garage. Or letter D. She weeded the garden before she swept out the garage. After listening and viewing to this video lesson, do not forget to do these exercises as your homeschool work for today. Worksheet number 14, English Grade 7, 3rd quarter. Thank you and see you in the next lesson.